Hello and welcome to the Stories That Brought You Here. It's the podcast dedicated to the stories of the people living in and around the Salish Sea. I'm your host, Chris Wakaluk, and it is my pleasure to get to sit down in conversation with people who live in this beautiful part of the world, to hear the stories that brought them to this magical little place we exist in, and to also find out what brought them to the point that they're at in their lives right now. This particular episode you're going to be listening to is part of a special series I'm doing called Welcome Home. As you know, the world has changed quite a lot in the last few years, and so has the little island that I live on that goes by the name of Pender Island. Many people have decided to make a big move in their lives and come to live in this place, and I thought that it would be pretty great to get to meet some of them. So these interviews are a bit shorter, and we get to hear the stories about why people chose this island, where they moved from, what their experience has been like for the first bit of time that they've lived here, and also hear a little bit of a background as to their lives as well too. And in this one, I'm going to be speaking to a gentleman by the name of Jorgen Jespersen. Now, Jorgen moved here in the early spring of 2021 with his wife and two daughters. They had been living in Edmonton prior to that, and they decided to make the move here, partly because of some friends that they had on the island that had moved here a little bit before they did. So Jorgen's going to get to explain a bit about his life living in Edmonton, which for him included 16 years as a youth worker. He's going to describe what it was like growing up in Barrhead, Alberta, which is a rural community not too far away from Edmonton. He'll talk about how he and his wife got involved when they first moved here with the Pender Pacers. That's a running club that exists on the island. As well, too, he'll talk about his experience working for the ambulance service since being here. All that and more in a great little interview that I totally enjoyed doing because I really like Jorgen. I got to meet him about a year ago, and I think he's a pretty fantastic guy. And it was really fun to sit down in my backyard and have a conversation with him way back in May. And a little side note to that, as part of the interview, we talk about Jorgen and his involvement with the training for the volunteer fire department, which at the time he was involved with. And we have a bit of a lengthy conversation in the interview about that because years ago, I took the training for the volunteer fire department, but only after a couple months of taking the training, I decided that was something that I did not want to do, and I let go of that opportunity. And since that time when we spoke in May, Jorgen as well is no longer involved with the fire department because things change. So Jorgen just wanted me to make sure that I let people know about that, and I want to let you know that thanks for coming to listen to this podcast. It's going to be a good one. So first we're going to hear a little bit of music, and then you're going to get to meet a new member of the community, Jorgen Jespersen. What was your introduction to the Gulf Islands?
7 or almost 8 years ago now, and I have to double check with Craig and Ruthie, but our friends Craig and Ruthie, who we knew, were originally from Edmonton. I think I met them 14 years ago, and they had been in Rwanda, of all places, doing like humanitarian work, and they were they'd sold their house in Edmonton, and they had family like scattered all over Alberta, but they were looking for a place to kind of have a break. I think some people might call it a furlough, and they knew Bobby and Lynn Cooper, and they said, hey, they were managing the Hope Bay Bible Camp at the time, and they said, if you want to come here, we got like extra space. And I don't remember the exact timeline, but they like rented a place eventually for a year, and we visited. I actually didn't visit them at that original place. I think we visited them shortly after they bought their place just over here on Forecastle. But then we ended up visiting them like, I think it was 5 times in 4 years. And I think most Albertans have some attraction to the coast, but it's also helpful if you have a person associated or people with the coast. And our kids are similarly aged to them. And I think it's not always the case that both members of a couple are like close with the other members of another couple. Like, sometimes you might be friends or close with a guy, but your spouses aren't necessarily close with each other, or vice versa. And it was unique that we had that. And then I think especially my wife really enjoyed the coast, and the idea came up, if we ever could make a go of it, why not? And in June of 2020, a position. My wife's a nurse practitioner. She became a nurse practitioner just over 3 years ago or 4 years ago now. A position on Galliano came up. Actually, no, wait. In 2018, she had just became a nurse practitioner and a position on Galliano came up.
Okay.
And she applied for it but didn't hear back. And then 2 years later, the exact same position came up. And I think even when in 2018 she applied, she kind of thought, there's no way. I have no experience. They're not going to entertain me. And they didn't call her back, so that she was probably right in her assumptions. But then in 2020, we were actually here visiting, and I actually said, why don't you ride your bike or borrow Ruthie's bike and just like ride your bike and take the ferry to Galliano for the morning and like go see the clinic and see if because the idea was like, well, if we lived on Pender, Leanne could ride her bike and maybe take the ferry because we weren't really interested in living on Galliano. We didn't know anyone in Galliano, and we're so people oriented that not that you can't meet new people on Galliano, and not that it wouldn't necessarily be a great community, but like what's attractive is the people you already know.
Sure.
And so I think she did. Like she rode her bike. I think it was an hour to the ferry from here, something like that. It was like 45 minutes to an hour. But the bike ride from the ferry to Galliano was really short, and she applied and got offered the position. But the way Leanne operates is she waited till she was offered the position then to start negotiating. And she wanted to be able to work 4 days a week on Galliano rather than 5 because the kids have a 4-day school week here. She wanted to be able to live on Pender, not Galliano, and they didn't like both of those. So she ended up turning them down. Not just for that, though. At the time, I still was heavily entrenched in my career, and it would have been at that time almost 16 year as a Christian youth worker with an organization called Young Life, and we weren't sure how we would properly or like seamlessly exit Young Life, and that was like July of 2020. And then in November 2020, I got let go from Young Life, and Leanne was like, hey, that position on Galliano is still available. And now the Young Life barrier or obstacle had been freed up. And so we were like, yeah, why not? And I was very intentional to be like, please don't do this for me. Like, don't feel like you have to take this position. She really liked her job in Edmonton. She was working at an inner city clinic. It was high intensity of complicated health conditions for people, like complex health conditions. But she really liked her coworkers. But we just said, why not go on an adventure? And that was kind of our rationale back in June of 2020. And we're like, our kids are at the time 9 and 7. And as a 16-year youth worker, I know very well that if you wait too late to move, like once your kids are 13, you basically have to wait until they're empty nesters if you don't want to experience civil war in your household. Oh, I think. Yeah, we had some renters in Edmonton that were from New Brunswick, and they had a 13-year-old daughter, and they negotiated with her that, like, hey, he was a pipe fitter, and he couldn't find work in New Brunswick. He's like, we'll go for 1 year to Edmonton. If you hate it, we'll move back. And they moved to a French community, and it was perfect for them in terms of the circumstances. But a year later, she's like, nope, and they moved back. And that's the way it goes sometimes. But
okay, so it seems like a whole bunch of things wound up coming together at the perfect time.
I mean, perfect is one way of thinking of it, sure.
Well, or maybe imperfect, because when we were talking on the phone a few weeks ago, you mentioned about this career of 16 years that you got dismissed from.
Yeah.
It sounded like it was a pretty dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, that's really hard. I'd only ever been like laid off or let go of jobs that I knew was seasonal or things like that. And it was a shock to the system, and Young Life's a very relational organization, and I understand how the decision was made to let me go. I would have hoped it would have never been made, but and I obviously wouldn't want it to have been made, but I wasn't expecting it, and there was a lot of grieving for sure with that, and I think long term the move was healthy for me. I think I was naive about how losing all my supports from Edmonton wasn't going to be easy for me here. Like, I think, for example, I got let go in November 2020. From November 2020 to December 2021, or like the year, I probably would have, my mental health might have been better if we'd stayed in Edmonton longer. The hope is long term, it will be better. If it isn't, that's too bad. But, I mean, it's still a nice place to live. But like, maybe it was a little bit rash decision to move. Like, 4 months after, because we moved March 2021 to Pender. We came here on March 16th or March 15th. We got here, I think. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'd only gotten let go 3 and a bit months earlier. And if we hadn't done the pros and cons back in like June and July of 2020, where I still had my job, I would have very much felt like, oh, we're making a knee-jerk reaction and this may not be the wisest thing. We may not be thinking soberly about this. And there was some hard parts about it because like Young Life is very much a grassroots, holistic, and all-encompassing career where like you're in the community that you're living in, and like most of the, like my school that I was working out of and my office in that school was less than 3 blocks from my house, and like I would regularly walk there, and driving past it wasn't easy afterwards, and feeling like I couldn't necessarily communicate with people, and like my psychologist has described it as like a divorce, so I'm like, I guess that's sort of true. I've come to realize though, thankfully over time, that like the relationships that matter still exist. And like one of the first people who visited us when we moved here was a girl named Jayla, who's like a single, young, attractive 26-year-old female, and her dog, and her and I went swimming in Roe Lake, and I'm like, Jayla, I love that if any other circumstance, this would be highly inappropriate, but like you're like a little sister to me, and I'm grateful that because of Young Life, even though I'm sad to have been let go from Young Life, like the relationships that matter will still continue to exist, and it's because of Young Life that we get to be each other's friends. And I don't think there's a lot of circumstances where that would be normal, and it has been generally true. Anyone that I care about, I still am very much closely in contact with. Actually, the things that make me the saddest is there was one coworker that didn't get along with me, and I really wanted to, and I would ask my supervisor to give us opportunities to work together, but she would generally avoid working with me. And I'm sad that I won't get that chance anymore, because like now outside of Young Life, if I were to initiate, she would probably not reciprocate. Like she didn't like working with me, and was kind of, we would do these like team building exercises, and I don't know if you know what the Enneagram is. It's all the rage, or it was all the rage. It's probably not the rage anymore. Yeah. It's probably so 2020. She was an 8, and they have like kind of a fierceness to them and a stubbornness to them, and she would be like, the thing about me is you're either in or you're out, and like if I really like you, I really like you. If I really don't like you, I really don't like you. And then I had to take her and my supervisor aside and be like, I think it'd be really healthy for everyone else, especially the newer people, to hear you say, and I'm trying to change that, because that's more of a statement of, if I don't like you, I just don't like you.
It's definitive, right?
Definitive. And I'm like,
the door is closed.
And then she came back and said, well, not in a professional sense. Like that's more of my personal life. I'm like, that's sort of like saying you're a vegan when you're working and not when you're not working. I'm like, you don't get to make that distinction. Like,
yeah.
Like if you're treating everybody in your personal life that way, how do you change that in your professional life? But anyway, I'm sad that like there were relationships I would have liked to have worked on. And I wonder how much of that is my insecurities of needing people to like me. I don't know. But yeah, those are the things I miss the teenagers a ton, but thankfully I still connect with a lot of them. But yeah.
So, okay, what I'm hearing is that when you first moved here, things were not hunky-dory, like, necessarily, right? Like,
mostly just my emotional state, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you and your wife purchased a house?
Yeah. We were very fortunate that our plan, like, we made the decision basically, like, January 10th-ish. And Craig and Ruthie Fair have I think it's a legal suite. So I'll find out, and you can edit out who had the suite.
Say it with confidence.
No, it's a cottage behind their house.
Yeah.
And we could have stayed there indefinitely, and our plan was to like get a lay of the land. Maybe Leanne's job situation would have been terrible for some reason, and we were like, okay, let's pull the ejection seat. But in early February, a house came up, and our 3 criteria were, we needed to be within walking distance of the fairs, just because they were going to be such an anchor for us moving here, and our kids get along, which this house was. We wanted a wood-burning fireplace, which is thankfully very easy to find on Pender.
Yeah.
Like in Edmonton, it's probably 1 in 100 houses. Here, it's probably 1 in 3. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, and we needed the ability to host people well. We didn't have a minimum number of like bedrooms or bathrooms, but this place has 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. So that checked off all those boxes. So, but we didn't step foot in it till after we bought it. So,
Whoa, really?
yeah, like Craig and Ruthie went and checked it out, and we did a Zoom call.
Okay.
And our friend Tavis, who's a contractor, came and looked at it too, and kind of gave us his opinion. But yeah.
So since you moved to the island and you've been here for this duration of time, which I guess is approaching like a little bit over a year and a half now.
Yeah, like a year and 3 months, or yeah.
Okay, about a
year and 2 months, sure. I don't know, whatever.
Okay.
14 months.
So what have you been doing in terms of integrating into the community and finding your place?
Yeah, right away we found the Pender Pacers, which is a running group that meets on Sunday mornings, and we had a mirror image running group in Edmonton called the Croissant Club that would run and then go find a place to have croissants and coffee. And so that was neat to be able to kind of, I think it was the following Sunday. If it wasn't the following Sunday, it was very soon after, because we had seen advertisements for the Pender Pacers when we had been visiting Pender. So we kind of were aware there was a running group, which, by the way, if you're even remotely into running, we're a fairly inclusive running group. Sunday mornings, 8:30 at the Medicine Beach Slow Coast Coffees where we meet, and then we run out to South Pender, and we do an out and back. So if you're 10K is our average, but if you're more of a 6K person, you just kind of run 3K out and 3K back, and there's different paces. I'm one of the slower 10Kers.
Okay.
So yeah, but anyway, I think if you have kids, that's an unfair advantage, because unless your kids are really terrible, but if your kids are social, no, because you could be that parent, and it pains me to think about the truth of that, but I was a youth worker for 16 years, so I know it's true. But like, if your kids are sociable at all, and our kids are social magnets, inevitably your kids are going to make friends, and then hopefully you make friends, or you like the parents of those kids' friends. Louis C.K., which I don't know if is appropriate to quote yet, he always jokes about how he's like, I've gotten to the age where I have to be in contact with other adults, but I don't want to be. I'm like, listen, buddy, we're not going to be besties. My daughter just happens to be in class with your daughter, and I got invited to this birthday, and that's the extent of our relationship. But no, thankfully we like all the parents of all our kids' friends, which is nice. I remember when our kids were younger in Edmonton, lamenting the idea that maybe someday, because we would just choreograph who our kids' friends were, because they're the children of our friends, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I'm grateful that we like all the parents of all the kids on Pender.
That's great. So so meeting people through being a parent and having those connections, and then the running and
then the disc golf group would be the other predominant group. So Craig and his Craig Fair and his sphere of disc golf influence in the Tuesday night people, and I'd say that's an equally big group of people that I've managed to connect with.
Okay.
And it's funny because I would have never thought that would be one of my social networks.
Yeah, like outside playing a sport together, like actually in the dark, because the Tuesday night group, it's generally dark out.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll show up with a mustache weeks later, and they're like, Jorgen, you shaved. I'm like, a month ago, but now we're playing it in the daytime. But yeah.
Yeah, so for those people who don't know, disc golf is a really popular sport on Pender Island that involves throwing a plastic disc through the air into baskets, and we have a beautiful course here, and it is attended by a great many people who love the game. Actually, and another thing I wanted to touch on as well too is that you talk about working for the ambulance service.
Right.
When did that start, and how did that start?
Yeah, like in the summer of 2021, so like last summer. I'm trying to remember how I initially met Krista. I think was one of the massage therapists on the island, mentioned that her partner was in fire, and then she sent me a Facebook message saying, hey, I think you should consider applying for fire. They're going to start their recruitment process in January. And a couple other people had approached me, and I think when I was really young, I thought about fire, but like in Edmonton, it's a career service, but my hometown of Barrhead, Alberta had a volunteer department, and I'm like, oh, that would be cool. So I started training in January, and one of the paramedics on the island, who at the time was the only paramedic on island, and like in a position named Daisy, I'm going to butcher her last name, I think it's Tahanappi.
Tahanappi, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
She was like, hey, you should maybe consider becoming a driver only, because there's like the special exception that when she was like the only medic, so that if ever there was a call, the fire had to drive for her.
Okay.
And all you needed was a class 4, which I had previously had from Alberta, and your first aid, which I used to teach first aid and lifeguarding in Alberta, and I was out of date, but I spent an hour online, which is scary to think, oh, it's CPR, it's not just first aid, that I was able to recertify my CPR in less than an hour. But I guess maybe the average person couldn't do that. I just knew all the answers to the questions. So
good work.
Yeah. So in March, I started driving ambulance here on Pender about once a week, and they're willing to accommodate my schedule that I'm only willing to do it while my kids are in school because my wife's off island a lot of the time, and I can't afford. Well, now we've negotiated that I could do like on call at night from like 8 p.m. till 3 a.m. because on average, a 3 a.m. call wouldn't go beyond 7 a.m. And so I could still be home to get the kids to school. So, but I actually just took the EMR course in Alberta or in Victoria. So now I could be more than just a driver once I'm licensed. So that was just last week.
And what is EMR?
Emergency Medical Responder, which I think both in Alberta and in BC is the entry-level position for being a paramedic. I mean, paramedic's a very general, thrown-around term. Within the world, I would never call myself a paramedic because a paramedic has a specific set of skills and scope. But most people, and even our jackets, say paramedic, so it's confusing to the general public.
Okay.
But yeah, like it's entry-level paramedics.
Okay, so, and the other thing you mentioned too is that you were talking about the volunteer fire department that's on the island, and currently you are in training right now to be a volunteer firefighter since January. How's that going?
Pretty good. I really like the group of guys that I'm with. They're all very down to earth, and everyone's in it for the right reasons. It's not about ego or, I don't know. Sometimes people have sort of a demigod persona about certain things, but it's just about they want to be helpful, and it's a way to give back and contribute. And I think that's a neat way if you're so inclined to be able to give back in that kind of way, whether it's the physical ability or just the aptitude for doing fire. It's one of those skills you hope you don't have to use. I think some of them might be excited to do it, but I'd rather not.
Well, I guess the expectation is once you complete the training that you have a pager and there's calls that happen and you got to run out and do what it is.
Exactly. I mean, I've just got given my first pager, and I could respond, but I couldn't fight a fire, so I could help with other things as a first responder. And a lot of the things we do are medical too.
Right.
So actually, we got a page this morning. So, but yeah.
That's actually a really interesting component about it, because being a volunteer firefighter on the island, which I took the training for 2 months and I eventually quit because I realized it was definitely not for me. I looked down the road and I thought, I'm not the person that wants to get up in the middle of the night and respond to high pressure situations. So I backed out of that, but I do have an understanding about what is expected. And it seems as if it's far more about medical issues than it is about disasters revolving around fire.
Yeah, especially on a smaller community, and like it's not integrated services, which is a term they use in a lot of other Alberta communities where you are a paramedic and a firefighter. But the firefighting, the fire department and the ambulance on Pender are so intertwined that it may as well be, and they do work really, really well together. Again, I think in the past in different communities, ego has been a thing that actually is it's a hindrance to getting people the care and the help they need, because they either draw battle lines or whatever it is. It's dumb and it's political sometimes. But
yeah. You know, it's interesting. I didn't mention this before we did the interview, but it occurred to me in this series that I'm doing of 10 people that I wanted to ask about how people see themselves being a part of the community and contributing to the community. But I knew from a previous conversation with working with the ambulance and then doing the volunteer firefighting training that you're already doing that right now. Because to me, I think it's a really great message to sort of put out to longtime residents and people who are new here as well too, that this is how this island has worked in the past, and this is how we're going to move forward in such a great way together, is that what we're doing with our own special skills and our energy to contribute to the island. And you talk about being involved with a great group of guys with the firefighting, and then making connections with people through the ambulance service. I guess you found a lot of joy with that so far, right?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. It's funny. I became an EMR in Alberta, but I never worked as one. I got my position and opportunity to work for Young Life. So I'd done some volunteering with the ambulance just to keep my status current from like 2003 to 2006. But then I let it lapse because I said, if I actually took a job, I wouldn't feel competent in my skills to be like actively doing it. But partly because Daisy and Anna, the other EMR that I've been working with, are so good at making you feel comfortable and helping you feel competent and never making you feel dumb asking questions, but also like pushing you to do stuff. I have been enjoying it, and my wife would love to get a position as a nurse practitioner on Pender, and there's always been this like, well, is there some benefit to actually working on another island because you don't have to necessarily know all the details about all your neighbors? But I think for peace of mind reasons, we need eventually for her to be on Pender to make this last, to make it sustainable. I don't think her commute is that long-term sustainable, but that's a little bit of a tangent. But there was this logic of like, well, someone has to be the healthcare provider on Pender, and why not her? Or someone has to drive ambulance and, take calls where you might know the address and you might have to see a neighbor or friend in some of the worst moments, but why not us? Because it's not like there's a special type of person out there that is immune to feelings. I hope not. And I don't know that you want that person.
Are they sociopaths or psychopaths or both?
Yeah, I think it is both actually. But it's a pretty selfish thought to be like, well, I don't want to have to be that. I'm like, well, someone has to, and maybe we are the right persons. So are people. And so far so good with the ambulance. And yeah, maybe long term, maybe my wife in the clinic and me in the ambulance. We'll see.
Well, okay. So what are some of the challenges that you face as a family with your wife having to commute? So it is 4 days a week that
4
she's
days a
going
week.
to Galiano, and she's catching the morning ferry that leaves around 7.
Yeah, which actually works relatively well. Like I come back, get the kids ready for school. Like the timing works almost too well, in that that ferry is almost always on time, and then occasionally her ferry home is delayed, but it just means that, and she could drive herself, and my brother makes fun of us because he thinks we're just dumb Albertans that like to waste fuel, but we actually kind of like the 15 minutes alone twice a day, and sometimes the girls join me to pick her up from work, but it's long days for her for sure. And before we moved from Edmonton, I was not the primary parent. She worked part-time and I worked full-time, and now I haven't mentioned this, but I just recently became a mortgage broker, because that was kind of my plan once we moved here. It was like, okay, I'll go take the mortgage broking program from UBC, and I'll have a job now that will allow me to work mostly while my kids are in school and remotely. And I like helping people, and I've been counseling former Young Life leaders and volunteers with finance and home purchasing. But going back to her whole system thing, is like 4 days long, and she really likes working in a collaborative medical environment. And there's only been one other physician on Galiano since she got there, and that person's only part-time, and that person's also leaving. So I don't mean to turn this into a podcast about Galiano's medical provider situation, but like, it could happen that the new person who comes in is also amazing and also collaborative. But most physicians sometimes are territorial, or some physicians are sometimes territorial, and they're like, yeah, don't bother me. We just happen to share a space. We don't like work together. So I think she would prefer something where her days are a little less long, and maybe there's more people in the clinic and it's a little bit busier. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all this, because I think that I'm a little delusional about what happens in people's lives when they move here, because what I'm hoping to accomplish with this podcast is to sort of show a bit of the struggles, but more just like, oh, isn't this great? People move to the island, and like, let's embrace them, and everything's all great here. But everybody has challenges in their lives, right?
Absolutely,
and the challenges with the commuting and the work, and it seemed like it was a challenging time when you first arrived here, for situations that happened in your life that came up with the dismissal from the job and all that. But I'm so thankful for you sharing all that information, because it's not all roses.
Yeah.
And I would like to think it is, but of course it's not in our lives.
And it's funny, because I think if you didn't know me before I moved here, you'd think I'm relatively social, but I'm actually much more I don't know if shy is the right word, but like, I would be usually more of an outgoing, like when I'm picking up my kids from the school, talkative kind of like, but I think I've, at least for a little while, it might have gotten better in recent months, but I think in the fall and the last spring, I wasn't really putting myself out there. And I think it was because I was still experiencing some depression and reluctance from the reaction from my dismissal or whatever it might be. But yeah, so, but it's funny, I don't think anyone would know any different because that's the version of Jorgen they met. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily abnormal. I'm more of like a toned down social Jorgen, which is more normal than the average person. So it's just funny.
So one thing I want to ask you about is you mentioned Barrhead, that you grew up in Barrhead. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know how many people have heard about this place, but I certainly have because I've been to Barrhead because I have some experience with working and residing in Alberta. And
I wonder what kind of how far a tower might have been from my parents' farm.
probably pretty close. So I used to work in fire lookout towers
Yeah.
in Alberta, and I had one that was nearby, but I had to do servicing on fire lookout towers, and one was in the town of Barrhead.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said you grew up there, I was like, damn, I remember that place. So it's very central Alberta.
It's actually northwest.
Really?
Well, it depends on what you think the center is, because Swan Hills is the center of Alberta, like the physical geographical center of Alberta.
Yeah.
Is Swan Hills.
It is.
I know you would know because you did a lookout.
But Barrhead's
tower.
not that far away. Is
No,
it?
no.
150
Barrhead is the
kilometers?
nearest town from that area.
Yeah.
But if you think of like Red Deer as the center of the population of Alberta,
Mm-hmm.
then it's nowhere near it.
The geographical center of
Yeah,
Alberta.
sure, but it's just a bunch of trees. Right? No, because most people don't remember that above Grand Prairie there's 600 kilometers of land, but nothing civilization-wise.
Of course, yeah.
Like high level isn't civilization, Craig.
Poor High Level.
Sorry, Craig.
Oh, Craig's from High Level.
That's where he was born and raised. Yeah.
Okay, funny.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up in the small community of Barrhead?
It was close enough to Edmonton that it didn't feel like we were that remote. Like Edmonton was only just a bit over an hour. And I think you take for granted that like the world's biggest mall at the time was like the closest mall to us because it was on the northwest corner of Edmonton. So as you drive to Edmonton, that's the first mall you come across.
West
and you
Edmonton Mall.
assume all big malls are that size. No, like especially when you're like 9 or 10 and you're like, oh, this is just normal. So I think it was like, and I grew up on a dairy farm northwest of there. So, and on a lake. And at the time, I don't think you realize how fortunate you are to have like wide open spaces, but still access to pretty much everything. I used to ride my horse to softball practice because like I played for a county softball team that was only a mile and a half away. So I just rode through people's fields. And like that was a very normal thing. But I think in a lot of small towns in Alberta, you get your driver's license the second you can. And like you get your learner's permit. Like the day you turn 14, if you don't have your learner's permit, you did something weird. Like why wouldn't you? And then 16. And then when you're a teenager, you're usually looking to get out of there. Unless you really embrace the small town party lifestyle, which I didn't. So I was spending a lot of my teenage years in Edmonton because it was just healthier.
So what were you doing as a teenager? What sort of, you mentioned softball, but what other interests did you have?
People mostly, girls specifically. But I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and I had 2 older sisters that were quite partiers. And so my parents didn't like that I was always going to Edmonton to go into like different church youth group things that I like had developed friendships with. But they knew it was healthier than the lesser and than like the alternative in Edmonton. So I calculated that like from when I turned 16 to when I graduated in high school, I'd put over 220,000 kilometers on my parents' minivan, mostly driving between Edmonton and back.
That's a lot of kilometers.
I know, right? That thing almost turned over 400,000. An average weekend would involve me driving to Edmonton at least twice, and sometimes 4 times, like depending on what was going on. I also wrestled on the high school wrestling team, but like that was more of just a side gig. I don't know.
Fair enough. Well, it's making a little more sense about you and your wife spending those 15 minutes together driving back and forth to the ferry. If you've spent that much time driving a vehicle in your lifetime, it's like and it is an intimate time in the morning to share that with your partner. I totally understand what you meant by that when you said that earlier. But,
my daughters never got to ride a school bus in Edmonton because we only lived like 3 blocks from the school, so we'd walk. But they love riding the Pender school bus, which in Barrhead it seemed like a prison you needed to get out of. So as soon as you have the opportunity to drive or have someone who will drive you, so my older sister would drive me in junior high, but then she was often late, so I almost failed grade 9 or grade 10 math. But you don't want to have to be relegated back to the bus, which is such a dumb idea. But I think it's just the sense of freedom. Like you finally have this freedom, and when you live a half an hour outside of this nearest small town, because it does feel like a license for freedom of some sort, like to be able to go to your friends' houses or whatever.
Yeah, of course it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you have a horse, then you can just take a horse.
Yeah, actually, I'm mad. I stopped riding my horse basically once I got my driver's license and neglected it.
Did you have your own horse?
Of sorts. I was the only sibling for a while that took interest in our horses, but at times we had enough horses that we could all have a horse per se, but they weren't always broken, meaning rideable is a term within horseback riding. Although I met a lady on Pender who got really upset with me that I asked her if her horses were broken. It used to have a certain connotation that the way you treated them to make them rideable was kind of harsh and aggressive, and but I know a lot of very, very gentle horse breakers. I don't know if that's what they call themselves, but
is your family back in Alberta?
Yeah, so my parents still have the same dairy farm that I grew up on, and my oldest sister bought the farm kitty corner from it, and she's farming with her husband with my parents. And then I have a sister in Dawson Creek that's been up there for 15 years. That's where her ex-husband's from. And I have a brother in Stony Plain, which is near Edmonton. And I have a brother who's transient, but presently on my driveway here on Pender.
Yeah, nice to have him on your driveway, or
occasionally. And then I have another brother who is a conservation officer in Canmore, but his permanent residence is Whitehorse, Yukon.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite places in the world.
I want to go visit him. I was supposed to right before COVID hit, and then he actually said, Jorgen, I will report you. Because at the time, they just shut down the province in the summer of 2020.
Right.
And he's like, if you try to come visit me, I will report you.
Okay. Well,
it's like, I love you, but I'm like, okay.
His job is more important than his brother at that particular point.
And public safety.
Public safety as well, too.
Yeah.
I lost count there. Is that 5 siblings?
Yeah, I have 5 siblings.
Okay. And where do you fit in the scale of ages?
I'm the third oldest, 2 older sisters than me, and then 3 younger brothers. And it's a funny issue because I have both my grandfather's middle names or first names as middle names, because my parents kind of agreed on minimum of 3 kids and at least 1 boy, and my dad got that with me, so they're like, okay, maybe this will be the end, but then they had 3 more.
What are your 2 middle names then?
William and Arthur.
William and Arthur. Okay, who's the most handsome of all the brothers?
Probably my youngest brother Jason, but he's not the tallest, and I hate that would count for something, because I'm like, I wish every man could be bald and just 5'11", or maybe 6 feet. I don't know, because height shouldn't matter and hair shouldn't matter. But he does have beautiful hair, though. Good
for him. I'm envious of beautiful hair in this stage of my life right now. When I see
and I'm sorry for that, because
Oh, you don't have to be. I have dreams where I have flowing locks, and
nice.
That's what I get. I get to dream about it, and then I wake up being like, "Damn."
I think it's such a dumb characteristic to worry about it, but I also feel worse for women in that they worry about so many characteristics that don't seem to matter. But
such is life. I think we're going to wrap it up in a little bit here, but I can't believe all the stuff that we squeezed into this time period here. That was
that seemed like a lot. Yeah,
it was a lot.
Hopefully it wasn't boring.
No, not at all. Actually, not at all. But just before we sign off here, I was just going to say, is there anything that you wanted to put out to the people that are going to listen to this, the people of Pender Island, anything serious or ridiculous that you want to add before we're done?
Oh man, I should have thought about that before. There'll probably be something that'll come to me right before, right after we stop. But I know in the past you've asked certain guests, is there anybody you want to recognize? And I think Craig and Ruthie Fair were the glue and the initial anchor for us to get established, and we're incredibly grateful for that. And I can't actually imagine moving any one place without knowing someone. There's no location I can think of in the world where I don't already know someone. I'm like, it might seem really beautiful like Hawaii, but I don't know anyone in Hawaii, so I wouldn't think to move there. But it takes a special kind of friends where you get along with them. You also get along with the spouse. Your spouse also gets along with them. Your spouse also gets along with the spouse. Your kids like each other. When all those ingredients work out well and you think similarly and you have the same values, that's really rare. So yeah.
Right on. Okay. Well, there's just one more thing left to say, and that's the title of this podcast series, and it's Welcome Home.
Oh, this is called Welcome Home?
Yeah.
Cool. And then there's a boat. Maybe that's poetic. I don't know. Welcome home.
The horn went as soon as I said it. It was good. Awesome.
There are other great people on Pender, so sorry if I didn't single you out too.
Awesome. Okay.
You know who you are. Yeah.
Well, that's what happens when you forget to mention the title of the podcast to the guest you're interviewing. You get hilarity at the end of the interview, just like that. So there you go. Thanks for listening to that episode, everybody. Really appreciate that you stick around to the end. I got more of these coming out in the very near future, so stay tuned for that. One of the best ways to stay tuned for that is through Facebook. If you're on it, I'll be putting up posts on the online market to let people know when new ones are coming out. But you can also subscribe to the Stories That Brought You Here page, which you can find very easily on Facebook. So if you subscribe to that, then you'll get updates as well too. And if you're at all interested, there's many old interviews from the past with locals who have lived here for a long time or a short time. And if you're at all curious about a bit of the history of Pender Island, please take a look at the notes in the show descriptions for people, and you can have some ideas to what the sort of topics we're going to talk about in the interviews. But I highly recommend going back and having a listen to the back catalog because they're there to be enjoyed. And they're there for us to get to know each other a little bit better and grow community. So once again, thank you to Jorgen for that. Thank you to Ben McConkey for providing the theme music to this podcast. And thank you again for listening. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.